How do you feel about language learning, for example, French or Spanish? If I was able to study French or whatever other language, I would want to do that. For a deaf person to be able to access that, I would definitely want that. I'm fascinated by foreign languages. And I know there's a spoken element, but why couldn't we do an alternative? Maybe there could be a written element, or I could actually do French sign language. Do you share language learning with your parents? Well, at home with my family, I've got my parents and my sister. So there are 4 of us. We mostly use BSL at home. My mum sometimes uses a bit of Latvian, and she can interchange between the two. However, my extended family, my gran, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, they're all deaf. Well, there are 2 hearing people in our family, my aunt and my cousin, but everybody else is deaf. And mostly they use Latvian sign language. How do you feel about BSL being taught in schools? It would be amazing. It would be great for hearing people to learn BSL. It would just be, amazing. Unbelievable, actually. I would be really happy to see it being taught to hearing peers, because that means, and I'm not saying they have to be at a fluent level, but even the basics like hello, how are you, simple things, it would be brilliant. Would it be helpful to sit your examinations in BSL? Well, for school exams, whatever subject it happened to be, they can film the exam in British Sign Language, where you can deliver your answers in British Sign Language, but you can also write it in English, so there are options. However, I do have a worry that if I wasn't to use written English and only rely on British Sign Language, that my English skills might diminish, and so I feel that I really want to use both languages. Did your school provide a British Sign Language interpreter when required? When I was in school, we had teaching support that varied, depending on what class you were in. But when it got to S4 to X6, when you were sitting your exams, it was important to have somebody that you had good communication with, and somebody who understood the subject, for example, a teacher that had skills in English, who were able to teach in English, but could also communicate with me as well. I rely on British Sign Language, and it wasn't suitable for me to have lip reading, and so it was important to me to have the appropriate communication for those subjects. Moving on into college, we had 1 or 2 interpreters who were there every week. They were all there all the time, and so they were always part of that group. What are the main challenges or barriers your school faces in engaging your parents in their child's learning? Well, my school would have parents' evening or meetings. The school I'm currently in, they provide a formal qualified interpreter to come to those meetings, but the school that I was in previously, if there was a parents' evening, they wouldn't bring in a formally qualified interpreter. They would bring in maybe a communication support worker. And they did a good enough job, I guess, but they weren't proficient in the language. They were okay, It did feel like they should be providing a fully qualified interpreter rather than somebody who wasn't fully qualified. My parents' evening was a bit different. My parents are hearing, and so the interpreter was actually brought in for me. In mainstream, you sometimes have to lip read, but I had the interpreter so that I can engage as well. Are your parents able to help you with your schoolwork? When it comes to homework, my parents are really keen to support. However, some of my homework, especially English, is really quite complex. And my parents, as deaf BSL users, do find that quite tricky. So I would ask my teachers to give me some support. How does your school engage with BSL parents at school events or parents' evening? If there are events like the school show or whatever, my school always provide an interpreter. And it just means that my parents can come and they can access and watch with the interpreter. Is there any information you think other parents would like or need to know if they find out their child is deaf? My advice is if you're told your child is deaf, try not panic. You should research to find out what deafness is. You can learn about British Sign Language. Learn about the language and the communication. You could go along to Deaf Club. Immerse yourself in the club and the people there. Maybe get some advice from those that are in Deaf Club. You could also meet with other parents who have deaf children. Go along and talk and find out. Meet other parents who are the same. And that could be really useful.